Hi, everyone, and welcome back to CUNY Uncut, where we talk about anything and everything, uncensored, unedited, and uncut. And as we approach the new year 2025, we're looking to better help and better serve marginalized communities in New York and across the country. Here with me today is a graduate student from Queens College studying urban affairs who's looking to get into policymaking at both the local and national level. Without further ado, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Aziza Sumler. Aziza, how are you today?
Great, I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your road to graduate school at Queens College. You're studying urban affairs. Can you tell me about what that process was like to get to this place in your career?
So how I happened upon urban affairs is I wanted to go back to grad school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was looking at Queens College. Actually, they had a library studies program. I did undergrad in history, and I kind of wanted to be a librarian. So I knew that Queens College had a library studies program. So I started to look into it, but for some reason, I stumbled upon the urban affairs department and things like that. And I had a small interest in it, but in the pandemic, I was working with the electric company, and I was reading meters, and we couldn't go out during the pandemic. So at that time, I was home as everyone else was, and it was that time when everyone was doing the firecrackers nonstop. And one day, I thought it was firecrackers outside. Come to find out, it was gunshots. So when I went outside, I ended up seeing someone was shot. I called the ambulance. Long story short, the person didn't make it. And then when the news came out, the person was, I think, 16 or 17. And then it just really awakened something in me. So it made me want to pivot what I was focused on. So it really urban affairs really became really more my focus. Uh, Things that encompass the urban environment, and how I can make change through that, with that interaction, with that experience. And immediately I applied for Queens College as a non-matriculated student, and then here I am now today. I tell people I took my classes guerrilla style, like I took it one, and then kind of dedicated myself to it this year, finishing everything out.
Well, congratulations. You're originally from East New York. You're graduating in
Yes.
December, looking to go into policymaking. Can
Yes.
you tell me a little bit about trying to incorporate, your policymaking and your ideas back into your local community in East New York?
East New York is, East New York is historically underserved. Historically, we're mostly black and brown people, black and Hispanic people. That's the gist of the population, and we're just historically underserved as far as education, as far as just resources in general. Where I live in East New York, East New York is kind of known as a place where we have rampant open prostitution. So that's one of the things that is East New York is known for. And I feel like as things are happening, as gentrification is happening, especially now with the city of Yes, even looking into the housing policies that our city council member is kind of allowing all these affordable housing buildings to be built in East New York. I don't want us to continue the original residents of East New York to be continuously underserved, bought out, and then pushed out of their communities. So my interest in policy comes from not only just East New York, wanting to service East New York, but historically underserved and marginalized people in general is really just my main focus, my main my claim to fame. I come from my background is kind of I would say a little scattered in the sense of I was in all of these different types of spaces, and I realized from just I wasn't a person that was on the outside looking in. I was from the inside looking out. I like to say, so I began questioning, well, but why? Why is this happening? Why am I not getting access? Why is this how it is? And that's kind of what led me and has my focus now on policy work.
And that's part of the reason why you want change in your specific community, because you live through those experiences. You don't always want somebody who, from the outside, looking in to try and make your policies. So being a part of the change that you really want to see. How do you try and encourage more people to be like yourself and try and go into policy to really help the local community at a wider level?
I think my influence is more so coming from like you said, as a person that's from the inside. I feel like I try to communicate with the people who look like me, the people who come from my type of background, my type of story. I want people to know you can. It sounds cliche, but oh, you can do it, and it's not you can do it it wasn't easy for me. This all came like this was like a hard fought battle. Like there will be like coming from not necessarily not just marginalized, but just like my intersectional identity in general. Like trying to fight to be in certain type of spaces because of how I look, because of how I speak, because people write you off from the jump. It's like kind of like I don't want to be gentle about it. I'm kind of like one like kick in the door kind of situation. Like I kind of want to move in a space of like aggressively take a stance against the injustices that we continually face, the things that continue to grow, the things that continue to spread, and just aggressively try to combat it.
And being real and being honest with your community is a big part of it. One of the things that you are currently writing about is your thesis capstone. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that and how that kind of wraps into everything that you study and what you really want to go into.
So my thesis capstone is basically it's a case study. It's focused on the cycle of poverty, and programs and program developers who come out and claim that their program is going to address, correct, or break the cycle of poverty. And over the years, this has been a niche thing that people have been talking about for years before I was born. The cycle of poverty, as we all know, is generational, especially in Black and brown communities. So what are these programs are coming in, and they're saying they're attempting to break the cycle of poverty. But the cycle of poverty has not been broken. It has not been addressed. It's the same. It's sometimes in different places it's getting worse. So where are these programs falling short? That's what my thesis is. And my case study is focusing on like charter school in general, like charter school specifically, because charter schools are are schools that are like, they're not governed by the same rules as public schools. The teachers don't have a teachers union. They're not governed by the same laws and provisions as private schools. But charter schools show up in Black and brown communities frequently, and they don't have to answer to the same rules and policies as private schools. So when they're coming in and they're saying that they're going to break the cycle of poverty, or they're going to help the students, you find that once you really dive into it, they're not doing that at all. And then at first, I think from the lens that I was coming from when I first started writing my thesis, was a little bit of again, aggressive, kind of like angry at the fact that it wasn't what they were saying. But then as I started to get deeper and deeper into my thesis and my research, I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's not that they're purposely not, or not necessarily, I wouldn't say that they were necessarily like purposely not doing these things. I think that they have these overzealous claims, but there's no one thing or no one program that can address the cycle of poverty. You have to take a holistic look at at everything that encompasses everything. You're looking at generational poverty, you're looking at, so that if you're talking about generations, you're talking about the students that's in school, their parents, their grandparents, the people that surround them, their community, the community that they come into when they leave school, and the community that they leave when they go to school. Then you're looking at the teachers, the quality of life of the teachers, because if the teachers are in a place where they're not functioning well either, like how can they be of service to the students as well? So it's just a holistic look at why these programs fall short, and what they can do to do a little bit better in addressing the needs of the community by being more focused and honed in on what they're good at, instead of saying that we're going to address cycle of poverty, because the students are falling short. The students are being they're not being serviced the way they need to. They're not coming out with any type of skill set, and then it just instead of breaking or addressing the cycle of poverty, it feeds it, because there's no way that the students are going to come out and be productive, in a sense of, if the students are graduating, they cannot read. If the students are graduating, they cannot do simple mathematics. How can they come out as productive members of society with these things like they're just continuing in the cycle? They're part of the next generation of the poverty cycle.
And it's especially hard for teachers as well to kind of go through these things. a lot of these programs have been really tough on them. They have to be babysitters and, as well as making a lesson plan every day. And it's very hard. I know that some teachers have been leaving in the middle of the year. How difficult is it for students to really overcome that when a teacher leaves in the middle of the year trying to get their best out of their education?
From my specific, if I'm looking at just my case study, if I'm speaking on like what I've seen personally as far as like charter schools and a specific charter the charter school that I was writing about, there was a lot of teachers that left in the middle of the school year for numerous reasons. They, like you said, a lot of the time they're babysitters because the students are so far behind that as they're trying to, even if they're developing lesson plans, the students cannot grasp it because you're a science teacher and you're trying to teach a science lesson. If you're an 11th grade science teacher trying to teach a science lesson to a student who's in 11th grade that cannot read sight words, the, he, the, they, she, how can you give a paper, how can you give a worksheet for the student to complete if the student can't read it, the student can't comprehend it? So it becomes frustrating. But then when you're meeting with your principal and you're meeting with like the higher ups, they're trying to figure out, why are your students not progressing? And it's a cyclical thing. It starts from when students are born up until they reach you. So I witnessed a few teachers leave in the middle of the semester, and how that affected students in particular was that there was no one coming to replace the teacher. So let's say a teacher left in let's say January. You have until June for the end of the semester. You don't replace that teacher. So you go in there, the students are literally in there with maybe a paraprofessional or maybe not even a substitute. A lot of the times like a paraprofessional. There's no learning going on. They're getting printouts, they're getting papers, they're throwing paper balls at each other. They're not doing anything. They're in the hallway, they're fighting with each other. It's just chaotic. There's nothing going on, and there was no replacement for those teachers. And then when you think of that also, it affects the students, but then you think also, why wasn't there a replacement? And it's not just the school, it's not just the teacher per se or the school. That also plays into workforce development when it comes to, in this economy, if I'm a teacher, I can't deal with this level of stress and then I can't eat at the end of the week. So it's just so many things that encompass everything and it just plays into this huge role of how at the end of the day students are being cheated, but when it comes down to it, you can't really pinpoint who's to actually blame. If there is any blame, I think it's a systemic blame, how things are, how things were, and people being very slow to change or want to make a marked change.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of these problems are generational and they're going to require a lot of complex solutions. How would you like to start that process of really making it better for the next generation of students?
In my thesis, I also take a look at some different programs that try to take a holistic look at education. In New York City, we have Harlem Children's Zone. That's kind of that was innovative and where they started to try to take a holistic look at development and generation. So you have the students who are going to the school. You have parents who are getting that they're going to learn from parental classes. You have GED programs that students' parents were in. So that's kind of I would say a way of looking at things holistically, but it's not the thing about these Harlem Children's Zone is one, and then also in recent days I realized I started looking up LeBron James has his I Promise Academy. Well, it's not really his; it's a public school. His is more so public school, so his school is it has oversight from from Ohio State, but they do a lot of things. They have the clothes that they give to the students, the uniform, the food that the families can come and pick up. They have GED classes for parents, they help parents find jobs, all those type of things. And that's really just again, addressing the generations. But I think that the main thing that I want to focus on, I think for me, I don't really have any answers or solutions because this is not a new thing. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been studied countless times by countless people over and over and over again. I think my focus more so is reverse engineering. Like, I was speaking to someone recently and I was saying, like, my theme of the year from my thesis is, but why? So I'll look something up and I'll realize, and there'll be a problem that comes up. And I'm like, but why is this? Like, but why is this okay? Why is it that we're going on like this is okay? Like, why is it that students are graduating and they can't read? I don't understand. Like, you have a high school diploma, but you can't read. It just doesn't go together. And and I think that inquiry is like, I guess to me it's more so like, you see, like, my face is like, that's how I'm looking at it. I'm like, so everybody thinks this is okay? Like, this is just fine to everyone. No one, and then you become like, and then sometimes it makes you become, in some spaces, almost like a pariah, because everyone kind of wants you to, it's some people, they just want you to be like, it just is what it is. And I'm just really just not, I think that's where I am. I'm not comfortable with it is what it is when I'm in spaces where I know that things could be done different, or think you can make a change, or even if you like, to think that a large change is going to happen from one specific program, one specific person, it's unrealistic. However, to just be like, well, it is what it is, it doesn't sit well with me at all.
You have to move forward, and it has to be a collective group, a community effort to really move forward with one another. I wanted to ask a little bit about your own experiences, growing up in the educational system in New York, and kind of what it was like. I know you started at private school and then eventually went to public school.
My education journey is an interesting map. It's an interesting map of education.
A lot of pinpoints.
A lot of pinpoints. From early on, I was kind of like described as a student with behavior issues. I always had behavior issues. All of my teachers marked me as someone with behavior issues. So I started off in private school. I was in private school probably until about the middle of 6th grade. I think it was the middle of 7th grade. So I was in private school. I never went to the 6th grade because, again, in private school, there's no oversight either. So I was in school, went to the 6th grade, and then because of my behavior issues, I was demoted. But I wasn't demoted on paper. I was just demoted to another class. So I spent my whole 6th grade year in a 5th grade class doing 5th grade over. But because it wasn't on paper, I had to take the 6th grade class test, the state test that we had to take in 6th grade. So I passed the 6th grade tests. So I was promoted to 7th grade without ever going to 6th grade. Then in the middle of 7th grade, I was thrown out of private school, and I went to public school. The behavior issues situation followed me through public school to high school. I went to public high school. I went to an alternative high school. My high school no longer exists. In Manhattan. That was interesting. That was fun. My last year in public school, I knew I wanted to go to college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do per se. I know I wanted to go to college though, but my college and career counselor in high school, she told me I shouldn't apply for college because I most likely won't get in. So, but I had a lot of support in my family. Like, my family was extremely supportive, and my mother and my father, they put me in tutoring programs, all different types of programs, because they knew, like, my father taught me from the beginning, like, you don't even ask anybody for any, like, this is you. Like, you don't have to worry about anybody else. What anyone says.
Go out and get it, exactly.
So after high school, because I was, I had my behavior issue situation. I had high on my readings, but low on my classes. So I graduated. I did 1 semester at Medgar Evers undergrad. Then I transferred to Penn State for to finish my undergrad. I went to Penn State Hazleton, which was a branch campus of Penn State. Then I went to main campus at Penn State, and then now I'm at Queens College. So I've gone through all types of different schooling environments. I love school, I'm not gonna lie. I do like school. I love to learn. But going through those different types of schools, like that's what really kind of like sparked my interest and my inquiry in like the urban education landscape. Like, again, it's like, but why? Like, there's so many different ways that, and so many different people who I've interfaced with in my education journey who has told me numerous times, like, this is not something you should be doing. This is not something you should be pursuing. And I don't know if I want to call it rebellion or what, like a kind of prove like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm like, to prove myself to myself, like, no, kind of like, you're telling me I can't, so I must do it because I have to show you, yes, I can. But then it makes me think like, how many students have gone through the same thing that I have and really took that to heart and said, you know what, maybe I won't apply to college, or maybe I do. Maybe my behavior is so bad I should just drop out of high school, or I shouldn't go to high school and things of that nature. How many people that were like me who didn't have the support that I had in my family, who went through those type of things, who just end up not reaching their potential or not even trying to do anything more because they were held back by the ideas of other people. So I think that's like, my school journey is like what really, really encouraged me, what really pressed me on, because like my teachers, they were really just like, they really wrote me off. Like, everybody knew I was intelligent, but they was like, no, like nobody wanted to work with me. No, I had to do it all on my own. So
yeah, it's really demoralizing to hear that and to think that there's so many other stories that, people don't reach their fullest potential. Truly, it just depends on the environment that you're in. If you're really like nurtured and encouraged instead of discouraged and pushed away, you can really accomplish such great things. And you've been finding that through your program in Queens College. And I know that you've been branching out and doing other sorts of things. I know that you just finished an internship. Can you tell me about what you were just doing?
Yeah, so I just finished my internship, a graduate internship with Assemblymember Khalil Anderson. I was working in his assembly district, and I worked in Far Rockaway, South Ozone Park with his constituents. Just really that part of urban affairs, like that internship really, really gave me a insight into the community needs. Like, again, I like the inside looking out perspective instead of the outside looking in perspective. So getting to know the constituents really gave me an idea of what do the community want? What does the community want for themselves, rather than, oh, this is what the community needs? Knowing from the community members out of their own mouth, hearing exactly what they're looking for from the assembly member, from their community, from just hearing from them personally, really gave me a different outlook on like what I can accomplish, or what do I need to be looking forward to? Like, I feel like even in my research, when I'm doing my literature reviews and I'm reading books and things like that, there's a list of things of, this is what I think needs to be done. And it comes from, in research, people always, at the end of the research, you come up like, this is what we come up with. This is what we need to do. But that's from your scholarly, from what you came up through your scholarly research. That's one aspect. But then hearing directly from the constituents, this is what we actually need. Mm-hmm. It gave me a better understanding and a better outlook of like, what do I truly want to accomplish? Like I said, I'm from East New York, so that's in Brooklyn. But the marginalized communities of South Ozone Park, Arverne, Far Rockaway, they all, like Far Rockaway, for example, is losing their train, their 1A train, in the beginning of January for 17 weeks. And that was like, I don't go to Far, like aside from my internship, I don't go to Far Rockaway at all. Like, I don't that's not where I travel.
It's a bit out of the way.
It's really out of the way. But once I realized that they was losing their train, like, again, it was like, but why? That doesn't even make any sense.
And it inconveniences so many people at the same time.
It inconveniences so many people at the same time. And then MTAs come into like community board meetings. They come into like different types of meetings in the community trying to say, listen, it's okay, we're going to give you buses. I lived in New York my entire life. I've never been, the least reliable thing in New York City is the bus.
Exactly.
Like, Far Rockaway is about 10 degrees colder than the rest of New York City because it's a peninsula. It's on the water. So when it snows, it freezes. The buses they're saying that the buses are going to come this time. And then they have a shuttle train too, but then the shuttle train is not going to be working for a couple of weekends.
And it's just a whole mess.
And then I asked, well, I don't understand why they're doing, it's going to be cold, so I don't understand why they're doing this like in January. And then my inquiry was met with, well, they don't want it to interfere with the travel season on the Rockaways. So the people on the Rockaways must suffer. So beachgoers in the summertime and like that area can flourish. So the regular people who live on Far Rockaway, who live over there, must suffer so everyone else can flourish. And that just seems to be the theme of just our theme as marginalized people. Like, the many must suffer for the few.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why you're looking to get into policy. You
Yes.
were originally in D.C. for a little while, for a couple of years, working in person while taking school remotely with Queens College, and you're hoping to get back to D.C., but you're looking to start in New York City with policy. Can you tell me a little bit about the types of things that you're looking to do?
I was looking forward to like get into like education policy, policy analyst kind of situations, or like intergovernmental affairs. Working when I was in DC, I was working directly with like students. I was working like living with students, working with students every single day. And then one thing I realized with working with the students is that working with students, let me rephrase that. Anyone can't work with students. Working with students is one thing, but I think I want to work for students more so than work with the students. Like, working with them, I was able to hear their voice, again, hear what they needed. Like, all my students who I worked with, all my students would tell you, like, I listened to them, like listened to their complaints, because that was one of the things I always felt like was missing. Like, when you go to school, there's like a level of disconnect when it comes to students and teachers or staff and things like that, where, you know, of course there's that level of respect, but there's a disconnect in where the students feel like, you just don't understand where I'm coming from. You just don't understand me.
Right.
And that's because I guess teachers and staff, they like to, like a lot of the times in certain settings, they take the role of like a disciplinarian. So I really wanted to take a different approach, and I really wanted to hear what my students were saying, because in their anger and their angst and things like that, what they're saying, pebbled in there somewhere, is what they need.
Right.
It's just their delivery is not in the cutest box.
Right.
I thought about it before, but my students really inspired me to want to get into the policy of education, like education policy, but especially working in a charter school. Once I realized that charter schools are like governed, they're not, they kind of operate as like a private businesses, like a business model.
Right.
Like that's how charter schools are kind of operated under. And I realized that my students were kind of like missing out on certain things. Like, one of the things that I realized is that schools know how to frame it in a box that looks okay for me and you. So if I'm passing by, like if I'm like the charter school board and I'm trying to see, oh, what are they offering? Things on paper that they do, it looks nice, but then it's like, we are in school, the students can't read, but every single week you're going on 2 trips out of the school building every day. So then on paper, the in-seat attendance for the students is almost, let's say you have a student that has 100% in-seat attendance. But in theory, every week you go on 2 trips a week. So you're only in school for 3 days out of the week. So your in-seat attendance isn't really what it is. So it's like, it's just getting to know those type of things, getting to know the intricacies made me realize like how we're doing a disservice kind of to the students. Do I think that it'll change overnight, or do I think that one program will make this huge change that'll change everyone's life? No, that's just like, it's just not realistic.
It's not realistic, exactly.
It's just not realistic.
And that's one of the themes that we've been talking about today. But a policymaker, a policy transmitter, I'm so excited for everything that you're going to do with your career, Aziza. And I really do wish you the best of luck, and I hope you make it back to Washington.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you all for tuning in to CUNY Uncut. And make sure to check out CUNY Uncut on social media and download the CUNY TV app. And I'm your host, David Horn, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.